this morning. We're looking in 1 Timothy chapter 6. You know, when we start on the book, we don't quit till we get her done. And we'll finish up probably this Wednesday night on it. Let as many bondservants as are under the yoke, that's those who are believers, under the yoke, that means they're harnessed. As Matthew talked about the yoke that were harnessed together, and working, making progress. So this whole book has been called Making Spiritual Progress. But now today we finish it up with making spiritual progress in tough times. Many of you who are under the yoke, believers, going through difficult times, yet as believers, and as Miss Kathy said, giving glory to God through every part of the experience, even though it gets harder and harder. And that's why the song Stronger just is a hard time, tough time Christian under the yoke pulling hard song, because it's saying to the devil, you don't know who made me. He made me strong. You will not break me. He made me strong. As many of you bondservants are under the yoke, count their own masters worthy of all honor. Wow. Number one, counting the masters as worthy. That's a release. Counting them as worthy. They're not saved. These are ungodly, unsaved, unregenerative owners of people. Now, bondservant is not a slave, but he is a contracted slave. In other words, he had no resources except his own body and skill to work. So a deal was struck. You will work for me for so many years or so many months, and then at the termination of that, you'll be released. So he is a slave, but he's contractual in that it's only for a season. And he says, as many of you who are pulling hard under the yoke, I need for you to count your master worthy of honor. You say, what's the big deal about that? The big deal about that is, imagine if you're the person pulling hard and you have no choices. Already this morning, you've had as many as 30 or 40 different choices. You could choose a regular donut, chocolate donut, or if you get here real early and know where they hide them, blueberry donuts. All of these choices that we make every day. And these guys had none. They're under the yoke, they're under the harness. And he says, I want you to count them as honor. That's difficult to do to someone who is not treating you as though you should be treated. So let me say this morning, maybe you have been a person who has not been treated well, not been treated right, not been given the honor that was due you, or whatever that fills in the blank for you. Paul is saying to them, look, it's a tough time for you, but you need to count them worthy of honor. Worthy of honor. Now, how do we do that? How do I count them worthy as honor? Because we're not bond servants. We're free of choice. We have so many freedoms, so many choices, that it's unbelievable that the rest of the world looks at us and all of these choices that we have and say, if we could just live in the crumbs of your choices, if we could just pick up the crumbs of all the choices that you make. I was in Taco Bell the other day, and I don't know why I was there, but I was there. And I'm standing, these two kids were in front of me, and, the Taco Bell menu, there's like 97 different things on it. It's all the same thing. They just put it in a different wrapper. But these two kids, they would look and then they would talk back. Then they would look and point and talk. Then they would point up, and we'd start again. Look, point, talk. Look, point, talk. Now, inside my spirit would say, order the dumb burrito. I'll pay for it. Just order the dumb burrito. Choices create that in us. We have so many that we literally cannot make up our mind. These are folks without any choice. And they have been told, count that owner as honorable. Did you know the first responsibility for those of us who are believers under the yoke, pulling hard against the world that hates Jesus and is soon coming to hate you, is to count them with honor? Wow. That would change the whole philosophy, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that change the whole outline and outlook of how you look at people? Even that you say, my boss is horrible. My boss is an unsaved person. My boss is this. My boss, and you still have choices because you can go work anywhere you want to go to work. There are more jobs than there are people right now. But to count them worthy of honor, I say, Paul, Why did you bring this here to end this chapter? Why is it so important? And we'll see just a little bit as we move forward. So, verse 1 and 2, and verse 2 says, and those who have believing masters. So verse 1 is unbelieving masters. Count them as being honor or worthy of honor. Verse 2, and those who have believing masters, don't despise them because they own you. So you say, are you telling me the Bible nowhere talks about slavery? Yes, it does. The New Testament is filled with scriptures about slavery. If you are a slave, serve. You say, well, why doesn't they come out and condemn it? Why wasn't there a Martin Luther King in 2,000 years ago? I don't know. I don't really understand it all, but I do know that the Bible says to serve, to serve, to serve. And now he says, for if you have a believing master, don't look down on them, don't despise them, don't be angry with them because they are brothers, but rather serve them because those who are benefited from your service are believers. Stay hooked up in the yoke because there are other believers that you encourage. Now, I have never had a traumatic brain injury like Joel has gone through. I've never done many of the things that y'all have gone through. I've not had to go through those myself. But you can fill in the blank with whatever it is you're going through, however it is, as a torment, a torture in the body, the spirit, the mind. But there are other believers who see everything that we're harnessed to. Every purpose that we can think of about why we ought to quit, why we ought to just chunk it all. Going to church, what's the big deal? Just chunk it all and stay home and watch TV. It's because, he said here, there are others who benefit from you being hooked up in the harness. And that's why I stay in the harness. My wife asked me the other day, we saw a guy harnessing a team of mules. She said, can you still do that? I said, I think I could do it in my sleep, but I used to harness horses, harness mules. There's so much goes on when you harness an animal. And it has to be about equilibrium, the pull. It has to be about the single tree or the double tree so that everything pulls together. It has to be about here in the shoulders, why that collar is there, so that when they press forward, it's not going to hurt them. And that person or that animal in the halter or the harness is depending on the other animal in the harness to pull as well. And so if you're in a harness and not pulling, what good are you? He's saying to every one of you believers who are harnessed, what good are you if you're not pulling? What good are you? So what good is a believer who won't encourage anybody else? You're good for nothing. What Jesus talked about with the salt, good for nothing, it's lost its flavor and just ought to be trodden underfoot. He's talking about believers who possess in their pulling the ability to help others and won't. The ability to encourage others and won't. The ability to take something that's bad and let them see that God is good even when the circumstances are not. So you're harnessed for a reason. And it's difficult to get in the harness, and it's even harder to get out. But while you're harnessed, understand this. It benefits believers and the beloved. So teach and exhort these things. So the teach and exhort these things is you're not bondservants, so you're not signing contracts for your life, but you are servants of Jesus Christ. You are to be harnessed to the circumstances, situations that you're in. God's going to get you through it because you are stronger than what it is the world's showing to you at the moment. So, one, a big C there is count them worthy, even though they're not. You know, it's easy to count people worthy who are worthy. It's kind of hard to count people worthy that you know they're not worthy. And so that's why it's a paradox. Number 2, verse 3. If anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent, there's our C word, consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud, verse 4, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes, arguments over words. Wow. You know anybody like that? They live to argue. They're proud. They know nothing, but they're obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, evil suspicions. Verse 5, useless wranglings of men of corrupt minds. There's the second C, and the one we want to talk about, corrupt minds. He is saying to us in chapter 6, you are going to encounter a corruption, not just of government, not just of economy and business, in which there is great corruption, corrupted minds. It's a Romans 1 situation, a Romans 1 mindset, and that's what Paul is saying. So he said, when you see these people, verse 3, 4, 5, they have corrupt minds. Listen, they're coming out, Britt and I were just talking before the service, people come right up to you now with ridiculous, corrupt minds, and don't mind, they're no longer hiding in shadows. They're bringing this ridiculous stuff out to the middle of the street. What we used to see in the back streets of America is right out on Main Street now, and it's a corrupt mindset. It's a Romans 1 mind. You say, well, you should not judge those people. Oh, yeah, I have to judge those people because the Lord has told us to judge those things that are right and not right. Now, here's this corrupt mind. When he says, verse 3, if anyone teaches otherwise and they refuse the words that are wholesome. So I don't care what group you're in, your words need to be wholesome. And wholesome does not just mean without any expletives, 4-letter words. It means to be rounded and filled. There should not be a movie that you're worried about whether your kids could see if you're seeing it. I think the way that we started this in the 70s of saying, okay, PG-13, now it's TV rated 14, R, and all of that. The easier way for a Christian who is harnessed in the harness, pulling the weight as a believer is, if your eyes don't need to see it, nobody else's eyes need to see it. If your mouth doesn't need to say it, nobody else needs to say it. Wholesome has one concept, and it's for everyone. It's not, well, this is really comedy, but it's not really for the young. Excuse me, how stupid are you? What do you mean? Older ears need to hear carnal? We need to hear more carnal than we have? Look, all you got to do is go down to Sandy Beach on a Saturday afternoon. You can see all the carnal you want to see. Do you really need more? And I love Sandy Beach. I'm just saying, they've come out with... have you ever stood in our Walmart on a Saturday afternoon in the summertime? Just stand there. If you want to hoot for about 15 minutes, you can see everything in the world and a lot that you'll never get back out of the mind once you do see it. Wholesome. Think about it. It's not just the words that you say. It's the condition of the mind and the heart. It should be wholesome. Wholesome. We should not be embarrassed by the things that we watch or see with other people or alone. If they're wholesome, what difference does it make? And we're excusing. I have a dear friend in ministry who I love him to death, but we disagree on our culture. He has said, you need to let the F word go. These kids use that in their culture. It's just part of the language. It's like you saying heck and dang. No, it's not. It's not. And you know it. We have just excused so many things. Your mouth needs to be wholesome. And if it's not, somebody needs to come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, this is not wholesome. Because I know what wholesome is. If I'm in a room and I know I'm Victorian, my kids will tell you that. I mean, but no one is going to sit in my living room and cuss me. Even my 70-inch TV, it's not going to cuss me. I pay for it, pay for everything in there, and it's going to be wholesome or it's not going to be watched. And see, that's the thing. Why do you watch Gunsmoke? Because here's the deal. Matt, he wouldn't kill you if you didn't need it. So it's kind of a Christian thing. No, I'm just teasing. But I knew the words and the vocabulary. And it was the wholesome words, even though a lot of people got killed. Miss Kitty is the paradox of that whole thing. She would get you drunk, then she was upset because there were fights and people killing in the Long Branch. So I'm not really telling you the truth on that. But I'm just saying, wholesome is a mindset that has forgotten in this culture, even in the Christian part of our culture. Corrupt minds. Romans 1 said, when they knew God, they glorified Him not anymore. When they knew Him, they saw Him. They saw the same glory that you saw. They saw how God was working things out. When they see that, they did not glorify Him any longer. They literally turned their back on the glory of God and said, I will just worship the creation rather than the Creator. The corrupt mind is a Romans 1 mindset that says, our animals, and I love animals. I prayed for Phoenix this week with a horrible accident. but we're now worshiping the creation more than the Creator. And it's not just dogs and puppies and cats and all that. It's the whole concept of a Romans 1 mindset that we worship the creation, the earth, rather than the God who made the earth. All right. So a corrupt mind is a Romans 1 mindset. And he says, listen, in tough times, you want to make progress, you're going to have to understand that there are corrupt people who have bad agendas and who literally do not have your best interests at heart. And whether it's Bible school, camp will be coming up here, and Brother Cole will talk about that in a minute, but camp coming up, a youth mission trip down in Monticello. It doesn't matter where they're going, what van they're getting on. I stayed in contact with the Nebraska team every day and every night. Why? Because part of us is out there. And are they all well? Are they all healthy? How do we need to pray? Because I felt like a part of us was out there, and it was vitally important. So every van that leaves here, doesn't matter what swimming hole we're going to, it's a time that I always sort of worry in the back of my mind, but trust God at the same time. I don't want anything to happen. I don't want anything to happen bad. Not that I can stop it, but if my prayers are proactive, I don't want anything to happen. We're all part of the same family. A corrupt mindset is this, though. And this is the difference. That's why he's saying it here. The corrupt mind is, I only have one agenda, and that is to cause a dispute and trouble. A Romans 1 mindset causes trouble. You may have to walk away from some people who are saying in verse 1 that I am a believer, but yet I cause trouble. Yet I cause disputes. And he says to them, they're silly, they know nothing, they're proud, and they argue, which creates strife, reviling, and evil suspicions. That's a Romans 1 mindset. And then we move verse 6 through 10. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain. That's the third C, contentment. And we're going to talk in just our closing moments about contentment and why it is so desperately needed like oxygen. Godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it's certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. All right. Contentment is great gain. He talks about counting the people who lord over you worthy of honor so that others can see what it's like to go through tough times and be in the harness. Tough times to me is not you breaking a fingernail. Tough times to me is those of you who have stood at the casket or the graveside of your husband or your wife or your papa. That great loss that you've experienced, that's tough. It's just an unbelievably tough time. And it takes a lifetime to accept and to live inside of that. That's tough. It's tough when you've lost financially and your home or whatever, and you're going through this great loss. And he says, I want you to understand that contentment is the greatest gain that we make. If you're in the stock market, you know there's this and then there's this. There's ups and there's downs. If you can't afford to lose it, don't ever go there. Don't ever say, well, I'm going to try to make my money over there. It's been said that if you want to make a small fortune with horses and being in the horse industry, if you want to make a small fortune in the horses, begin with a huge fortune. And then you can make a small fortune because you're going to lose money. Losing money as a farmer has become such a way of life. But contentment, going through all of this and content. What does content even mean? Now, I'm going to ask you to silently vote, but don't raise your hand. Are you content this very moment? I mean content. He puts it in two things, that godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing in, we're taking nothing out. For sure, we're carrying nothing out. And then he mentions two things that are the baselines of contentment: food and clothing. So let's ask that question. First, let's vote on food and clothing. Am I content? Am I content? I'll let you take a second to vote. Don't raise your hand. Have you voted? I'm content. See, to me, contentment about food is really simple. You eat and it's over. The clothing thing is even more simple with us men. It's more simple. My wife texted me at about 11 o'clock, said, how you feeling? I said, I'm fine. So what are you wearing in the morning? That's a dumb question. I have no idea what I'm wearing in the morning. Why would you even ask me that? Is it laid out yet? Because she's not here with us. Is it laid out yet? See, that's just weird to me. But I know you ladies. I know what you got to do. So I'm content. So the baseline of contentment is eat, put your clothes on. Eat, put your clothes on. Get up and do it again the next day. Contentment moves, though, into godliness, because he said godliness with contentment is great gain. So he moves the baseline to food and clothes to life itself. Now let me ask you this. Are you content with who you are with? Are you content with the person living with you? Are you content with the person you're living with? Are you content with the car that you're driving? Are you content with the house that you're living in? Are you content with the bed that you're making? See, contentment then moves into every area of life. The baseline, food and clothing. Get up, eat, put them on. But all of life is meant for a believer to understand contentment is a part of godliness. In other words, it's wrapped into this thing of being harnessed into the pulling stock. Contentment is found in that and being godly. What's the hard part? When my daughters were young, there was always a pushing of the line. A pushing of the line meant, wow, that's a real pretty dress. Where's the rest of it? And then the roll of the eyes, the teenage eyes, they roll, Dad. And when they roll the eyes, all of that, all the responses we're going to get, then they go back and we start again. You say, how long did you do that? Not long enough, but I should have stayed with it just like every dad. But what I'm saying is, there's always going to be the pushing of the line. That's what teenagers do. See, there's not a lot of difference in teenagers and old people. Really not a lot of difference. So they're about the same. See, old people are teenagers with wrinkles. The whole concept that he talks about, this contentment, is great gain. So, for the believer that is harnessed up, going through difficult points of life, the contentment that you're going to experience is not being released from the harness. It is understanding that it brings a godliness that cannot come any other way than being under in submission. I was thinking one thing when I got home yesterday. It was around noon. I was thinking, when I get into the fifth wheel, I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to move, not going to talk, not going to do anything. And I was kind of looking forward to that. Then it actually happened, and I got bored really quick. So I started writing, and I said, this is not good. And I decided to fix a meal. I mean, a real meal. Like full thing out. Thank you. And I was not pleased with it, what I fixed. I was not pleased at all. And of course, I didn't have my chef here, and I was having to serve myself, and nobody seemed to care. Nobody brought me any food. So anyway, you know what I did? Put it in the trash, and I started again. I lost my contentment even with the food, the baseline part of it. I was not happy with what I was making. So we're going to make it again. Sometimes I wish I didn't have to live me. I exhaust me. But he says contentment is great gain. Contentment with godliness is even greater. So are you content? You say, Brother Bob, I'm not. And I don't want to raise my hand because I don't want anybody to know I'm not content. It won't matter whether you raise your hand or not. The Lord already knows that. And I wish I could say, okay, I'm just going to stand up here and pray and get content. That won't ever happen. Get in the harness, though. You get in the harness, start pulling. You'll find that contentment comes easier, and that food and raiment is simply food and raiment. It really is. Something something has gone crazy from the 50s, the 60s to current culture with men. I saw a young kid, and he had the big bun thing, and I don't care about that. I just can't grow one. But I think Brother Benny would look good with the bun thing. It wasn't that. It was y'all know who Pee Wee Herman is? Y'all remember? We laughed at him for the suits that he wore, and now this is what they wear. And he just bothered me. The look. Something has happened in which now we're trying to take manhood dressing and turning it into some sort of real fashion thing. And you say, is that actually going to be in your sermon? No, it's just, I thought I ought to throw it in here on the end. Because men ought to be men, and they ought to look like men, and let ladies look like ladies. I'll never say to any of you men, you look lovely today, because you don't. But you ladies should look lovely today. Contentment, though, is not me desiring to go have another shirt, another color of clothes, another pair of boots. It is, I'm going to get in the harness, and I won't really care, because godliness with contentment is great gain. Let's stand together, shall we? Hey, count them worthy. But they don't deserve it. Yeah, you're right. Count them worthy anyway and get in the harness. And as you get in the harness, you understand this. You can be as content as you want to be. Because nobody can make you happy. If I want to say one last word today, it's this. Nobody on this planet can make you happy. Nobody. I do not care how much money they have to say, I'll make you. You can't be made happy. You just can't. It has to come from the inside, and if you ever get linked to contentment, then it won't matter what anybody else has, wears, sings, says, does. It just won't matter. Somebody texted me the other day and said, we have 2 Taylor Swift concert tickets if you'd like them. What planet did you come from? My answer back to that, I don't remember where this was. It was a few months back, or where it was. St. Louis, I thought. I wouldn't go to listen to her if she was singing in my backyard, much less drive to St. Louis, Missouri. Well, you could give them to your granddaughters. No, they can pay for their own if they want one. I have no interest. Now, if George Strait was singing in my backyard, I'd just give me a lawn chair and go on back there. I'm content without it all. You got to stay hooked up in the harness to get to the point you can count others worthy or that don't deserve it in your life. Let's bow for prayer, shall we? Where are you today? Are you content? Where are you today? Couldn't vote because if the truth were known, there's a corrupt mind. He said, verse 3, 4, and 5, that there's a corruption that's going on of the mind that just leads to silly arguing, silly disputes without knowledge for no reason other than to elevate self. Are you content or not? Because I'm telling you, if you're not, it is time for a change. Time for a change. Time for a change. Be content with such things as you have. The baseline is food and clothes, but the whole life is godliness with contentment is a great gain in your life. If you're here this morning and you say, I am not a contented person simply because I do not know the Christ that you're speaking of. I'm not saved. I'm religious but lost. Then right where you stand, as we've said every day this week, come to Jesus. Confess, telling yourself. That's all it means. Dear Jesus, I am a sinner. I ask you into my heart. Lord, I've sinned. I've talked so bad about you and other people. Lord, I'm tired of living this way. I know that you shed your blood for me. I know that you gave your life for me in order that I might have a relationship with you. And I accept you into my heart. I ask you to be my Lord. Maybe you're here today as a believer because you're just here and you know it's the right thing, but deep in your heart there is a discontentment that's growing. Things aren't right. Don't pass it by today. Don't wave it off. Today is the day you can say, I turn this ship around. I'm back in the harness where I can pull the load and benefit others from what I've gone through. So, Father, help us today.